Welcome to our session of the oral history here at the Somerset Library. I'm Harold Rivard, and this is Roland Belisle, and we'd like to talk about some history of art that we're aware of. We'll start with Roland and some family history.
Okay, well, we'll go back here. We'll start at my great-grandfather come to Somerset in the 1870s. And my grandfather, in fact, my great-grandfather settled on the LaMire place, if you're familiar with that, on 80th Street. And my grandfather lived kitty corner across the road. Then my grandfather, in between there, he went to work in Minneapolis in the mills in the 1890s. And they moved out here around 1900, from what I gather. And my great-grandfather even had a little gate in the yard for the Indians to cross. When they fenced that off, Ma told me that he wanted to be friends with the Indians. The Indians didn't bother anybody, and they weren't going to bother them, so he had a little gate in the yard for them. And my grandmother, she was from New York. And my great-grandfather then moseyed down here from Canada. And my grandmother was also from Canada, but they had moved to New York first. Then on my mother's side, my grandfather came here, and I believe that was the 1880s. Yeah. Well, that was my great-grandfather, and my grandfather and them, they settled 1 mile west of town here, right by Felix Landry's, Helen Landry's place, right in this side of that. They settled there. And my mother's mother, her side, that was the parents. So they were the first people to come to this area in 1848, Louis and Joe, brothers. And then we'll move on to more modern history. My parents were married in 1928, and they lived right down here across from the sewer plant, or the Float Right property today. That's where they moved. In 1929, they decided to build a new home. At that time, my dad was in sales, car sales, and he decided to build a new home and probably going to do some farming. Well, in 29, he got robbed. $500 cash. They tied him up, took the money. So my dad went to the sheriff and he asked him about this. He said, well, I'll tell you what you do. You buy yourself a big gun. So it wasn't too much later, these guys come back. Well, needless to say, one of them got shot, and they weren't bothered for a while. But then in the 20s, with the Depression and everything, my dad had to try to grub out a living, you know, and so then he went into the business of a little bootlegger. And he found that it was so easy to make a still, he's making stills for everybody in the country. But then after that, he had a few bouts with the law. Mother was put in jail one time because she was caught with the booze. And I believe Archie Mumsey was the one that bailed her out. And one time these guys from the city's got the bright idea they're going to kidnap my dad. They're going to have a still maker, and the guy knows how to make moonshine. Well, evidently when they got down by Hudson, they chickened out and left him go. So he made his way home. But then I grew up in the 40s there. I was born in 39. And my memories of that were, pretty good. I mean, I had lots of older brothers and sisters, so they kind of looked out for me. You know, I didn't have to go without a lot. I mean, things were pretty tough in the farm, but yet they were out working, so if I needed anything, they seemed good, I got it. So that was pretty nice. We'd be one of the younger ones of the family. But we'll start with a typical school day. You know, you want to let that go? Okay, give your family history. Yeah, go ahead.
He'll talk forever.
You could be so lucky.
My parents came from Canada. Oscar Rivard was my dad. He was about 5'8", and he went to 3rd grade, and he went to North Bass Lake School till that. And this is a granary on Howard Warman's farm now. But he went there to 3rd grade. Grandma and he had 6 sisters and 1 brother, and they were all raised on Howard Warman's farm. And he would grub out his dad would, in the wintertime, take the horses up north and haul logs out all fall into the winter. And then he'd get back in the spring. And 6 of his sisters were born in the same month.
Oh, yeah, that's the same year.
Same year.
So that's kind of interesting. They would grub out the trees, and then Grandma would take care of the farm during the winter, and with all the girls. He had one older brother that was the oldest, and then he was one of the youngest ones. And when we were young, they all spoke French, so we didn't understand what they were talking about. Anytime they wanted to say something, not let you know they were speaking French. My mother grew up in Burkhardt. Her dad was Hugo Redley. Hugo was a big fellow, about 6'5", farmer. He worked on the ice, and we have his records from the 30s when he cut ice. It was 30 below zero, 40 below, 20 below. It was really cold. Then he was a prison guard. And my mother's mother was Lena Beer. She was about 4'11". So my mother always said when Grandpa slept, he slept crossways, and she slept in one corner. Bob Hartman is one of my cousins, and you might know him. And so it's kind of interesting. In all our families, there's 8 in our family, and of all the kids, there's some 6'5", and there's, like in my family, there's one 6'8", almost every family. So some took after Oscar, and some took after Hugo. He was very good with Mustangs, and he farmed all his life. He lived on the Warman farm for a while. Then he went to where Louis Granger lived. Things were really tough. My sister Dorothy went to Four Corner School, but it was so cold, and he always jacked his car up and left it sit through the winter because he couldn't afford to run it. And if he needed a car, he'd ride down to Warman's where his dad lived and borrow his car. And so for 2 winters, Dorothy never went to school. It was just too cold to walk. And let's see. He was always really good with Mustangs, and he always talked taking these horses and training them, and people said he was really good at it. And my Uncle Eli Rondo and Hugo Redley were walking down on the Burkhardt Mound, and there's a trail going up, and all of a sudden he come riding through with his wild horses, and they both jumped in the ditch, and he said, "Here's that damn little Frenchman coming around here again." So they eventually got married, and they farmed, I think 1941 they bought the farm on 160th where they ended up their career as farmers. Okay, then we want to talk about the school days.
You want to talk about your
Ron went to St. Anne's, and I went to public schools.
Well, a typical school day, I'm going to start with what I had to do. We'd get up 5:30 in the morning, and that was my alarm, and that was Dad to come over and say, "Hey, time to get out of bed." Well, we knew what that meant. Head for the barn. So I had to head to the barn. We did chores for about an hour, milk cows, whatever. Come back and cleaned up, because we wouldn't do breakfast unless we cleaned up first. And then about 8 a.m. I'd start load up the truck to go deliver milk. Later years I had to go into the bottling plant and do the little work in there, but we'd go deliver milk, and I'd deliver milk for about 45 minutes to an hour before St. Anne started at 9 o'clock there. Then we went to school all day, and at about 4 o'clock, I believe school left out there about 3:45. Well, a little after 4 by the time I get home, it was the same old routine again. Change clothes, go milk cows, come back in, get fed, do a little homework, and if I was lucky, I could head to town and bum around with Andy Vanoss or something. In the winter, you didn't get a chance to do much of that. But getting back to school, now St. Anne's, that was really modern compared to what Harry had there. You know, we had 3 whole biffies instead of 1 whole. But it was the nuns. They were tough, but they were good. You know, they come out and they played ball with us at noon and this and that. But they were tough. And if you got too much of a scrap, I don't know. Rubber Roy probably can remember it. They'd say, "Hey, bring the boxing gloves tomorrow, boys," and you go to it. So we'd bring the boxing gloves. Discipline. Well, Sister Regine, that's the one I can remember the most. She's the one that loved you the most. Remind me a lot of Bob Seibel. Knocked the hell out of you, but yet she was your friend. She'd pick you up and, I can remember one time. The Indian Trail. Rubber probably remembers the Indian Trail. There was a little trail down past the school, and we walked the riverbank all the way to town. And I don't know if it was an old cattle path or what, but it was a nice little level spot. I remember one time one of the girls followed us and she fell down and got hurt. Well, of course, who got it the next day? Give me your bell. But we had a lot of fond memories of St. Anne's. And then I come to town and went to high school. Let Harry give you his elementary.
Well, we went to Had to walk every day about a mile, a little mile and a half. Wintertime, we could sled down to this school. This was North Bass Lake, on County I 160th. I drew a little diagram. It's located on 1 acre. This was the school, and you had the coal, because they burnt coal, and the girls' outhouse is over here. And it was a 2-holer, and this was the boys, and this is 1 acre. And the school itself had this big furnace in the back. And so it was responsibility of the older kids to get the coal and put it in there. And Mrs. Landry, Florence Landry, was our teacher. And everybody in my family went through 8th grade with her. And the desks were all nailed to these boards. So you had about 8 desks in a row, and they're all nailed down, so you can't move around. They're all nailed on there. Later on, they improved by cutting them off in sections, so that the desk and the seat went together, so they could maneuver them. Big kids in the back, little kids up front. When she presented a lesson, she probably about, I think the one year I was there, the most we had was 12. Last year we had 8. So you might have kids in 8th grade, you might have a couple in 4th grade, or maybe only one in 1st grade. So as we go through the day, when you'd go to your lessons, you'd go up front, and she'd give you your lessons, but if you were not called on, you sat there and you were quiet. And she was had these blue eyes that could look through you. And then if you were really naughty, she would go up and give you,
Oh, good.
and got your attention right away. So she didn't tolerate any talking, because you can't with that many kids and that many different classes. So a lot of the kids, the younger ones, would listen to the older classes, and it seemed it helped a lot, because if you were in 1st grade listening to a 4th grader, time you got there, you could remember a lot of that stuff. So we walked every day. It was even it was cold. Very seldom did we get a ride. In the morning, 15-minute recess. In the afternoon, 15-minute recess. Half-hour lunch. Always packed our lunch, and every day it was peanut butter sandwiches and tomato soup. And to this day, I can eat them alone, but I can't eat them together. And she had a little hot plate. You pour your soup in there to heat it up. We used to get up in the morning too, and then go down. Jim and I were the youngest, so we'd feed the cows and then run back into school started at 9, get dressed and go. And I remember my first day of school, I had one brand new pair of pants, and that was it for the year. Take it off when you get home, put them on when you leave. A new pair of overalls. And I remember when I first started teaching down in Cedarburg, we had one farm kid in class. And I picked him out right away. Boy, he smelled. And I got to thinking, that must have been the way we smelled. I didn't know any better, because everybody else smelled the same way. So school was a 1-room, large windows, cold, large grid in the back. Water came from Uncle Henry's windmill, which was Henry Klucher. He had a windmill, and it had a 55-gallon barrel there, and we'd go in there, and then we'd pull it out and bring it to a large bubbler at school, fill it in the bubbler, and then during the day, if you wanted water, you just drink. And Art Landry, Florence's husband, used to run the dam. Each day in the afternoon, he'd come to pick her up or talk to her, and he'd bring his dog. And I remember he always watered his dog out over the overflow. The cloakroom was where the entrance was. And let's see. One instance of discipline, when she first came, I wasn't there, but Gilbert Brown had 3 kids in class, and the oldest one was Harold. And he goofed up, and she pulled his hair. Well, he went home and told Gilbert. Now, some of you might know Gilbert. He's a pretty feisty guy. And he came the next day, madder than heck, that she pulled his kid's hair. But she said, Mr. Brown, this is what Harold did, and this is what I did to him, and she pulled his hair. He stormed out and never came back. Back at that time, there were 6 country schools, the North Bass Lake School, Landing Hill, Sand Hill, Lakeside, Four Corners, and Riverdale. In the early 50s, they started consolidating, because we only had 8 kids my last year, and the parents were given the choice of which school districts if they were on the border. And that's why we have such a hodgepodge today, because like Summer Holmes, that went to church in Osceola, so that 80 acres, 2 miles from Somerset, and 12 miles from Osceola, the kids all go there. So that was our school day. Okay.
I'll tell you a little bit about as long as Harry described the school. I don't know if anybody here remembers old St. Anne's School. It sat right back there by the convent, and the cemetery was our playground at the one before they began the cemetery. And that was a 3-story school. A lot of kids, more kids were there than in all the public schools, because I think we had like 200 kids there. was about 40 of us in a room.
We had a lot of kids.
First and second grade was one room, third and fourth was another, fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth. And as long as here he's talking about discipline, Rubber, you remember the paddling machine?
Yeah.
If the kids were really bad, the seventh and eighth graders, you had to go between their legs and they'd whap you one in the hind end. So if you had to hit the paddling machine, you had to be a fast crawler.
Well, I remember if you didn't, when the nuns put you through there, the guy crawled between your legs, and if we didn't take our belts off and bury them, they'd make us go through it. So you had to take the belts off and nail the guy, and it was fun.
I think you were probably, Rubber probably was through that paddling machine. I never was. I did it myself. But anyway, so now I suppose we're going to attend high school. Huh?
All right, now back in the, just trying to have a history, what Roland and I could figure out, back in 1916, this building was built with 3 classrooms, a big library, lunchroom was in the basement, and
By the way, I'd like to have you share some of that discipline with me, Mr. Rivard. Hold your hands up. I'm going to show you.
Mrs. Landry's discipline. And when I started teaching, I used the same thing. 'Cause a lot of kids, sometimes they're really good kids, but sometimes you don't like what they're doing. So you got to get their attention. So my reason was that's where I learned, was get it by the short hairs, and then it's forgotten. And they usually were pretty good. And some really didn't like it, but they didn't have much choice. Bobby Seibel was Mr. Seibel's son, and he had the habit, being a big kid in 6th grade, of leaning back on his chair all the time. And in Minnesota, a kid went over and fractured his skull. So I told him about it, and I said, I'm done talking to you. So I'd walk up to him, behind him when he was leaning back and just give him a lesson. And after about 4 or 5 times, he quit doing it. But I had him because he wouldn't dare tell his dad. His dad was superintendent. But anyway, that hair pulling, you can't do it today. But what happened at St. Anne's when you did that Indian trail trick? And
you know, she says, take off your belt. I know you got to, but hold your hands out there. I'll give you a little demonstration.
Oh, boy, she was mean.
Oh, she damn right she was mean. But yet she forgot about it.
Okay. So, one memory I have of this building was Dorothy and Shirley, my older sisters, were going there, and at homecoming time, they took us down there, and in this entryway, some kids brought an outhouse there. You know who did that, Marianne?
No, wasn't me.
Well, your time, wasn't it?
Yeah, what year do you think that was?
Oh, Dorothy's 74, 76.
Had to been about 53, I'd say, because I can remember I was going to St. Anne's at the time, and it sat there for 2 days because the principal said, the guys that put it on are going to take it off. And I know it sat there for at least a couple of days, and the principal was Froker at the time. I remember that, but that's all I remember.
Okay, and then in 1938, they built the gym, which at its time was the classiest gym in the country, in the whole county. New Richmond used to come and practice on it. And there was 2 classrooms, and when we consolidated, we were in this, the 4th through 8th grade was over here. No, 5th through 8th, and 1st through 4th was over here. And this was Mrs. Wiggy and this is Mrs. Landry. So these were 2 elementary rooms, and the bathrooms are down here. The bleachers, what, 4 high?
Yeah.
They modernized it later, made it
5,
made it 5. And we always had to enter from the outside over here into the gym. But this was really a neat building, and it was built in 1938.
It was an easy gym to sneak into because the windows were huge and just about at ground level, so, well, like that, so you can, the friends, if you had something you had to pay for and you didn't have enough money, your friends, a bunch of them sat up there and they'd open the windows up and let you sneak in.
Let's clarify, country kids never did that.
Oh, yeah. The only reason you did, because we couldn't get you through the window.
It was pretty agile back then. 1954, they added some more rooms. Here's that 1960 edition, and they added a shop, ag, chemistry, home ec, in rooms up front in 1954 edition. In 1961, they added the other wing with all the elementary rooms in there, so I remember I was teaching in this room, and Sandy Swanson was here, and Mrs. Schmidt was here, and Mike Nelson was here then, and then there was 3 classrooms for the high school over here. And the courtyard, this is where Louis had put those spruce trees. He took such great care of them. They were about, what, at the end, 30 feet high?
They were big.
And just as thick, and every year he'd go and prune every little tree. 1965, then they added the 8 classrooms upstairs in the lunchroom on the back side of where the old building used to sit in 1916. This is the courtyard, and then the rest of it was gone. So they added a band room. When we were in high school, our band room was a stage with 2 practice rooms. And the stage had curtains on it. Then they decided they wanted to use it in classrooms, so they put paneling across it. And then about 1970, 80, they took them all down again and put curtains again. Chris Haslam came to town and she liked to play, so. That's kind of history where the schools went in 1976, the new school was built out there, and this one was tore down, and everything was tore down 3 years ago. So, okay, so that's kind of history where the school.
I ask you, when did you say the first high school was built?
1916.
1916.
Unless that one, I don't think that one next to the store was a high school, was it?
No, there was one, somebody had a picture here,
Yeah, Andy Vanoss brought a picture of that.
okay, of that building.
Right.
A little
And
old
I have that bell. In fact, I'm gonna
Got the bell?
put it outside at the school. It's at the school. I believe Rita's the one that brought it from Mrs. Myers. Didn't you get that from Mrs. Myers? Well, they said it come from Mrs. Myers. Well, I know your son helped me work on it when he was in school, because he had it as a class project. So anyway, that bell, that we were told that's where it come from because it came from Dorothy Myers' house, they said. So Mrs. Myers probably would have acquired it, I imagine. Couldn't see it go.
Okay, now they had this school, that wasn't very big. Was there no high school? Did you have to go someplace else to high school?
I remember Lyle Liberty said they went to Hudson.
Yeah, they went Hudson or Stillwater. I know some people
Oh,
went to
really?
Stillwater.
Or to Richmond, I suppose?
In Richmond too, because I can't remember the names, but they said they went on Monday and stayed the week in Richmond
No, okay.
for high school. Robert?
Did you say before the high school that they tore down, they had another little high school? Did I hear you say
The
They
that?
had a little
1916
store.
edition was where that courtyard was. That's where the 2-story, the 3 big classrooms and library were the
Yeah,
old one.
okay.
They tore that down and built that 2-story.
Okay, yeah.
Okay?
But I got a couple of just notes here. I remember the year of '52 snow. I mean, we had snow up the Yang. In fact, County Road I, they had to take a bulldozer and open up the road. And that was a lot. And then in '54, I think it's the first time we had a TV. I can remember Steve Martell had a colored TV. So we were going to go down there, see that. Well, here it was, isinglass, different colors, red, blue, and green, I believe. And that's what you looked through. Then it had a big magnifying glass you pulled out for. That was, but that was Steve that had that. And I got a couple of.
Going back to that storm, I remember it simply because we had to take the horses and put on the bobsled, throw all the milk cans on, and take it down to the Bass Lake Cheese Factory. That was quite a ride. Fun time, but the bulldozer had to come out there. They were pushing snow up on top of the telephone lines. That's how much we had at that time. But Grandpa always said, you know, you should have lived in the 30s. Man, we had snow, we had to drive in the fields. They put skis on their car and everything. But in the 30s, when they built the roads, they just went straight down. So when the snow built, it filled it all in. And then in 1978, 80s, we had 2 record snows in about 2 weeks there. So then tell me about the 30s.
When I was a kid, I can remember the houses down at the falls. Evidently, that was the first settlement. And there was, I think, 8 houses down there. But most of the people lived there, worked for NSP. NSP, I think, owned all them houses. And they had 2 plants. That one, the one in town, and Riverdale. These guys lived down there, and I think Riverdale plant maybe had a house up there. I can't remember, right across from the dam there, that old homestead there. But that,
Just take that a little further. The plant down there was, I can't remember when it was built, but what was the year of that big flood? You guys have
65.
You had a big flood. Going back history, the Riverdale Dam on what I can't remember again, but they tore out the one down here because it was too much sediment. They weren't getting enough use out of it. It was cheaper to make electricity out of gas and stuff like that, so they tore that one out. And then they left the Riverdale, and they were thinking about that, but they realized they went to Germany and got some new turbines put in there, so that's pretty efficient. But same with the falls, they redid that one and put efficient turbines in, and then they control everything from St. Croix Falls. But there used to be about, what, 6 houses at the falls? Or
6 or 8. I know, I can remember 6 for sure.
Yeah, two across from the old elementary school came from the falls.
And they had an artesian well down there that fed them houses.
Across the river, they had a spring come out, and they had a big cistern like, and they had a big pipe went all the way across down to those houses. So the water run continuously, whether they used it or not. Kind of interesting. It was a beautiful spot down there to live. Later on, though, so many kids went down there to party, the NSP fenced it all off.
Never do that.
I think it was somebody before me, some of our more astute citizens today.
I got a couple of notes here. I remember thrashing. That was always a good time in the farm.
Well, I'm remembering is Harry Liberty thrashed before we did, and that big thing was coming up the hill, and they wouldn't let us out of the house. Making so much noise and big steel wheels, and set it up behind the barn, and we could watch from about 200 yards away. Grandma wouldn't let us out of her sight. But it was, then later on, Grandpa always left to go thrashing, and then the 3 of us had to make hay, and that was tough when you're only like 8 years old trying to lift those bales. And that's about the end, because then they bought 2 5-foot Al Schomer's combines, and that was the end. I still remember running dump rake on the horses.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the dump ring.
So I was right at the end of all the horses. And we were down to Cashton looking at the Amish, and it's just the way they farmed, what we did in the late 40s yet. Because we didn't get electricity till 48. He had electricity all the time, but country was different.
Yeah, not in the barn though. We didn't. The house, the house was going. Yeah, we had modern facilities.
So we had kerosene lights to study in the barn. You took your lantern, hung it on the post to milk the cows. And
Yeah, 1 lantern for the
it
whole
was
barn.
it was tough.
Yeah.
Well, I was pretty lucky. I lived in town, but yet we lived on a farm. So I mean, at least we did see some civilization, not like that poor guy. But you remember Andy's tap room that was here in town?
Yeah.
Now this was that was where Jake's barber shop was, isn't it?
Yep.
Right next door here. Would be 2 doors down. And then
That was strictly beer, right?
that's strictly beer. Yep, tap room. And then he moved out of town. He got,
Did he leave on his own free will?
wow, a little bit forced out, I think. He didn't get along with the neighbors there.
I remember about that, he had an organ, and Professor Fritz from the University of Minnesota used to stop. And if he played the Flight of the Bumblebees, those walls just,
He was a tremendous organ player.
yeah, and then he would go up to the
That's what
place,
they
but-
told me, because I never was in that place.
Anyway, I think thoughts on that, but I won't say them. But Andy LaMire had that place, it was 18, so all the kids could go in there at 18. Just like a lot of these country bars were all 18, but the other local bars didn't do as well as business sometimes, so I think there was a little jealousy involved. And then there was an incident where some of the Osceola kids got in trouble and got blown all out of proportion. Pretty soon they found out Andy didn't own more than 2 feet behind his building. Pretty soon there was a wall. You couldn't open the back door, so the fire department said you can't be here. So then he picked it up and went up to the county line where Pottings is now. And that's where his bar was put. What are some of the places, Ron, you used to hang out when you were in high school?
Well, we would go to Jerry Belisle's. Jerry mentioned that a couple weeks ago, right kitty corner here where the shirt shack is. That was our hangout for high school there. Before that, that was an old doctor's office back there many moons ago.
They had a room back there, and the kids always used to go back there and play cards.
Play cards, yep.
And Morse, everybody always went there for spaghetti, 10-cent pop. Banana splits, 50 cents, couldn't beat them.
I remember the nickel burger. I could still see the sign out front. Remember Morse's on this side of the street, remember?
Yes, I do.
And I could still see that nickel burger sign. It was kind of faded and was in blue, about the blue of Aki's shirt. I imagine when it was first painted, the 5-cent part. It was on a whole white sign.
I got a question coming back to where Pottings is now. You remember the bar that was there before?
Mel's Hut.
There you go.
Yeah.
The little Quonset hut.
Yep, it was an
About
actual
4 bucks.
Quonset hut.
Yep.
It was a bar.
It's still
Yep.
there.
It was a bad spot because Mel was kind of blind. I remember one guy who was 14 years old used to go in there steadily and buy booze.
Oh, no.
I went there once, but I was so nervous if my mother got me, she'd kill me, so I never went in again.
When
Yeah,
we
it
were in
was
high school, that's
it's
where we
easy
spent
to
the
get
lunch
beer
hour.
in high school then. Okay. So those are the hangouts we had. Not a lot of them in Somerset. Stores, everything was at LaGrandier's store, Fred LaGrandier, but I always remember the freezer in the back. Oscar Graff, everybody had your freezer, 'cause you didn't have freezers yet invented. And it was always so darn cold in there, and you'd pick up a few steaks or whatever you needed. And he was always a great guy, Oscar.
Do you remember the movies alongside the old high school?
Yeah, we talked about that one time. If
Oh, I didn't know you got to town that often.
Once in a while, yeah, we did. That's typical with him. That was-
You know, I didn't know, you country kids, you know. I know Roy's had a car. I mean, they were all over. I always seen them guys, but I never seen you Rivards.
No, we didn't have a
We
car.
were, we were one of the lucky ones that had a car when we were 16.
That's right.
You know,
I remember at noon, they would trust me with Mr. Tweeten would give me his check, and I'd take it to the bank for him, and go to take the mail, and get a big time candy bar for 5 cents. Or I'd race Gaylord Stoner and the other Fagnan, Francis Fagnan, down to get a bar at noon. It was a good time.
Yeah, you know, haul school mail after, I worked for the school here the last 20 years before I retired, but in high school, that was my job, haul the mail. Bob would be busy, if Mr. Seibel was busy, they'd get me, that was my, once in a while, I'd get Rubber to help me or somebody, but Mrs. Hogan, she wasn't real free about letting him out of class, you know, never tell where he'd go. But we'd, in the mail, honest to gosh, you know, today you get tons of it. Used to have maybe 6, 7 pieces of mail, and the big thing was films. You know, if you had 2 teachers ordered films, and you had them, they were all them old 16 millimeters. And that old projector, what a piece of junk. That was my job in school, run the projector while everybody would holler and scream at you if it went haywire, and it ran haywire more than it ran right.
It was like duplicating lessons. When Mrs. Landry out there, she had a foam rubber, and she'd make a copy, and she'd put that on her and make an impression. And then I think she could get 4 copies off of that. Rub it on, press it down, and then you'd have a copy. So that was how she did her copy. It was a tough job for her.
But I didn't have anything more unless somebody's got some questions. What
Any
do you have,
questions
Harry?
on?
I got a question on Somerset going to Roland or Harry, whatever. Maybe Joyce would know this one, but I'm gonna ask them anyway. Dutchtown down there, where did they ever get the name Dutchtown?
Well, German families had moved in there.
Okay.
And, yeah, and I didn't realize it, but I got asking questions, and they call their homeland the Deutschland,
Okay.
I guess. Is that, you know, see, that was totally Greek to me until, because I said, well, but Dutch people must have lived there. And I talked to Joyce about that. She don't know, never German people, she said. In fact, she said, Perlin Klug, did you say?
He lived down there, Jerry Crotty, well, the Hex. I mean, most of us were German that ended up, Marie Stroben.
That's how come it smelled like sauerkraut every time I drove the truck down there.
But Grandma Heck, she was highly admired because she figured Dutchtown referred to a lower class of German people. And she's, you know, she'd stand herself up real tall, and I know she was maybe 4'9", you know, at her highest, with about 3 layers of petticoats on to make her look full. And she, oh, Dutchtown. Oh, you know, that was just beneath her because she had her broad chair and her hair was in the bun, and she thought she was, you know, pretty snappy looking.
Okay, so where exactly is Dutchtown? Like,
It's
what's the
down
street?
at the end of, you know, if you go straight ahead on Spring Street, just right down past the maintenance building there with the city hall, just straight ahead. Instead of taking the curb and I, just go straight ahead down there. Down by Joyce's house.
It's where all the action is in the summertime when there's floaters.
Well, that used to be they used to cut ice right there. There was Helmer Olson had an ice plant there. He'd cut ice in the winter, and he had a big warehouse, big old barn like in the back, and packed sawdust. And that ice would last all summer. We'd
Wasn't
go
the
there.
old bridge down there too?
Yeah?
Yep, the old bridge was, in fact, if you're coming down Sunrise, you went straight ahead, that was the old bridge. Right there, and if you
Can I
coming from
ask
the
a
north,
question?
it's the other side.
When the dam was there, before they have what we have now, the big dam, how deep was the water along Dutchtown? Was there no Dutchtown?
Gilly Chase.
Oh, before the
Across
dam?
bridge.
Yeah, before.
Or,
That water whacked all the way up to Swamp John's.
Yeah,
With the
okay.
dam in town
Then there
there.
was no Dutchtown at the time, that was all flooded?
No, if you
It
go
came
there,
up
no,
the
no.
first
Oh, no.
level.
No, that wasn't
Just
flooded.
the
Drops
first
off, that's
level,
all water
okay.
down
That's
below.
what I was wondering.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
came up much higher.
It was deep.
probably backed up 3 miles, 2
Well,
miles.
Yeah, it was backed up a good 2 miles.
That
Well, I
was
don't
deep
know.
because Sheila Bro used to dive off the bridge here all the time.
Billy Shea too.
Did he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been about 18, 20 feet of water there.
Yeah.
Well, we used to swim there, and when they had the dam open, there was so much current that you would have to, none of us kids knew how to swim. We dog paddle up the river, and it would carry us all to the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
And,
You're living
Nobody
life in the
drowned.
fast lane, weren't you?
oh, it was scary when I think about it now.
Swamp John, what's the story on Swamp John? Who was that? You know more about
John Martell. Well, now that you bring that up,
Relative.
we used to rent that, you know where Floaters Haven is today? We rented that, and we drive our cattle through town every spring down there, and we milk the cows there, and then Dad could farm the 55 acres we had in town. And that, yeah, spring and fall, we drive the herd back and forth right through town. Bunch of us kids running ahead of them, and my dad would be in the panel truck behind them, and we never lost any cows.
Who did you say started that down there? Martell?
John Martell. But I was talking
Ryan
about
had that.
when
No,
we were
yeah,
going
yeah,
to
but John Martell lived there, John O.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but how did he lose his legs?
He
Froze, he
John
froze to
Martell.
the, froze
They
his
were
legs.
froze. Yeah, the house that I was from John Martell.
No, I mean Swamp John.
Swamp
Mom
John.
John, oh, he was the crippled guy, and he was down by the river by Uncle Edmund.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but how did he lose his legs? He froze them in the
Froze
winter.
him, yeah.
Probably had too much to
He was
drink.
drunk.
In the
Yeah.
summertime, he'd take his boat to town. That's why he traveled back and forth in the summertime.
He never won that lawsuit.
No, I
Never
guess
liked to
not.
stand on. All right.
Now,
We used to see him walking all the time.
this stove that I have in my garage, this flamenco stove that I have, and that was from Grandma Hick.
This is heck.
Grandma Hick, they had that in the rooming house.
Yeah, see, this was a hotel, Mrs. Heck's place
Yeah,
here where
yeah,
Kim
hotel.
and her husband live now. What's his name? Give mother the stove.
Dean.
What? Dean. Dean Heck.
Dean Hick.
Made sure mother they had a little cook stove there.
And it's got flamingos, and it was used to, it was a wooden stove. And they put wood in it, or coal, but years ago it was hard to get coal, so we had branches and old trees and things like that we break. And Dean Heck gave me the stove when he left. He said, "You've been good to my mother," and said, "And Dad, and I will give you the stove." So he took some cat that he hauled it out and put it in my garage.
Well, anybody else have any questions?
I have one more question. Somerset. Where did the name come from?
Oh, that's easy. Harriman, which was the founder of the area, he came from Somerset County in England.
Okay. Thank you.
But John Martell is the first owner of my house. And Grandma Carr built the house next to us, that is rented now.
Oh, okay.
How about, can you tell about the beginning of tubing?
Well, we're not that old, but there was some tubing back in the 30s and early 40s, I believe, but it didn't really get going until early 60s, mid 60s. That's when Floatright bought that property from Mother.
Once the dam went out.
Once the dam
You're right.
Once the dam-
Right, had the overhead lift.
Right, they had a chairlift there. And they found out that didn't work out as great as they thought it would, so then they started busing them and
That
whatever.
was the son of Henry. Henry started.
But yes, floating got pretty heavy back then, and now last few years it hasn't been near as much because of so many things to do around the cities, for one thing.
Cold summer.
And cold summers and,
But he did, was it global warming?
Yeah,
Right,
last summer was
yeah.
cold. That wasn't too bad. There was some hot spots there. And then, as soon as it gets hot, a lot of people come, but when it's cold, they aren't gonna sit there. It did start back at the terrace when Spider Bro would have gamblers come out, and supposedly they had kids and they did nothing to. So Speed Bizzo would they jump in the river and float down to grandma's land across, and they had a cable, and they'd just keep going that short distance. Then when Float Right came into being, they had a chairlift that would take them up to the terrace. From the terrace up to Village Park. No, from that spot down by the cable up to
Yeah.
Village Park. Then you'd walk to the dam, and it was busy. There was a lot of business then. And then the dam went out, and then Gerald Plord could start floating, and the river's edge could start. So there were years when you'd see 20,000 people here on one day, and it was bad because people were walking. Then they put the buses in to pick people up and bust everybody. And one day, I used to manage Village Park, and that one day we ran out of tubes, and we never did that because the other places always ran out first. And Float Right had how many thousands of tubes ran out. But I went upriver, and it was just like army ants coming down. You had to wait for a place to jump in. It was really a hot day, and everybody decided to go floating. So there were some big days, but then between drugs and alcohol and a lot of bad things were happening, and they banned the can, and it's hasn't been back to that where it used to be yet. But
Well, it never will be because there's so much more to do around the cities.
you know,
I mean, there's a festival going on every weekend. Back in the 60s, there was nothing going on over there. Everybody come to Wisconsin for the entertainment.
You didn't have beer on Sunday over there, right?
come for
Yeah,
that.
no, that makes a
Well,
difference.
then too, when one time Minnesota went 21, Wisconsin was 18,
Mhm.
and we had tons of people. In fact, Archie's used to always have old time music, and everybody go to town. But then when Minnesota had that change in law, all these kids are coming. Well, then they had changed their music, and everything changed. Nobody came to town anymore.
It all went to hell in a
Yeah.
handbasket.
Did anybody ever talk about the bank robbery that we
That's
had?
coming up next week with Joe Casey.
Oh, okay.
good.
Or next week?
We
But
don't
how
wanna-
about
We
Mr.
don't know what day
Bishop?
it is. I don't know if it's next week. It's next week, yeah.
Oh, okay. How about Mr. Bishop, when he was here, he
He
made
was-
a skating rink for the kids every
Yeah,
winter.
right across from this house in the corner, 1 block over.
Right next to the high, right
It
next
was
to the
Mr.
school.
Bishop lived there, and he was a depot agent.
Yes,
And
we go there
he
all the
was
time.
clerk for the school for umpteen years. I mean, I can't tell you how long, but that guy
He's a
could do
wonderful man.
everything. I mean, bookkeeping, taxes.
Did our taxes for years.
They said
He could
if
walk.
he could walk down the tracks and he'd get a teletype, you know, car number so-and-so, we can't find it, and he could tell them if it was parked out there or not. And back then, there was quite a few trains that were parked here in town, because there's 3 or 4 sets of tracks there back then. And it'd be nothing to have 20 cars sitting on the siding, 30. And that's not a big amount, but to figure probably a 6, 7-digit number was on them, to be able to answer, if that was in there, I think it was pretty good. He knew everybody's license plate.
He had a photographic memory for numbers.
Yeah.
One guy came to town and went in one of the establishments, couldn't find his car, and he asked Ray Bishop, "Oh yeah, I saw it over on the side street." He remembered where it was. Yeah, he was quite a guy.
Was.
What were your favorite holidays, and why? Was there something interesting your families did?
My favorite holiday was the centennial here that I can remember the best. I remember that real well because I remember everybody, us guys weren't old enough to grow peach fuzz yet, but everybody grew a beard in town, and it was quite a festival, the centennial. It was really a lot of hell raised, but it was a good time by a lot of people.
Barbara Kazali was here. She's
Yeah.
still alive.
Yeah.
But she sat in the water tank, and you could throw the balls.
Yeah.
She had her big centennial dress on. Yelling and screaming at those guys, and they were that was so funny.
Yeah, she was.
She was a character.
But get back to your question about holidays, I don't remember, I guess, maybe Christmas, but we never got a lot. You know, I mean, Christmas you eat good. I mean, and I can only really remember one new thing my godmother gave me, and how they could afford it, they had 9 kids of their own, was a little airplane, little tin airplane. But that's the only thing that I can ever remember. Well, later years, my brothers and sisters worked out, they always brought us plenty of stuff. But when we were really young, there wasn't a lot to go around.
Got a stocking with an orange in it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we always ate very good. Lucky being on the farm, you were lucky. A lot of kids in town didn't eat or didn't see meat very often. Where Somerset, I think, a lot provided for others too. You know, as far as
When Dad's brother, Uncle Paul, he had food stamps. And you know, one thing, we would trade food stamps and we would give him eggs and different things so that he would have, we'd trade.
yeah, so we could buy certain things at the store.
Shortage during
Yeah.
Depression time.
And he was poor as a church mouse, poor guy. I mean, he had,
But we always had plenty of food.
Oh,
yeah, we ate
had
good.
a lot of food.
Yeah,
We
No,
raised
we-
everything.
we had a big garden.
Yeah.
I mean, that was another
5
thing.
acres of strawberries, and we sold the strawberries by the crate. There were 16, and we had to make our own boxes, and they were 16 quarts to a case, and we peddled them to St. Paul, down the market, and we got, well, sometimes we sold 6 cases for $5 to get rid of them.
I'll take 6.
But at that time, everybody was the same shape.
Yeah.
The neighbors weren't any richer than you, and everybody did the same thing. It's not like today where you got people who have huge mansions and somebody that doesn't have anything, so. But everybody was the same around here at that time. Nobody, I always thought Jerry Graff was rich because he got to bring banana sandwiches.
Yeah.
Every day.
Peanut butter and banana.
Well, that was
Banana
really-
sandwiches,
Yeah,
every day.
yeah,
That's
that
what
banana
Kraft had.
sandwich.
Hey, you talk about Jerry Graff, Izzy Lane, does anyone know Izzy Lane still living? Elaine, she's married to Tommy Tobin.
They live in Florida.
Oh, they're in Florida.
Yeah,
I think-
yeah.
I've never heard that
Yeah,
she
my
passed
brother
away.
Bob talks to Tommy quite a bit.
Oh,
In contact with him.
Florida.
In fact, he come up when we built Bob's cabin and helped us a little bit. Yeah, they're around, and I'm sure she's still alive.
I stayed at Graff's house many, many times when I was in school, because I was friends with Phyllis. And to me, that was the Beaver Cleaver family. That's just exactly the way they lived. Oscar worked at the store, his wife stayed home, took care of those children, that house was immaculate, just like Beaver Cleaver. Which is no more.
Yeah.
Mary Ann, what was Oscar's wife's name, you remember?
Lillian,
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Harry, did they have, or Roland, did they have passenger trains in Somerset?
Oh,
That was a big.
yeah. In fact, my great-grandfather
We used to get on the train.
over here, in fact, my grandfather, that's the way he commuted. He worked at the mill in the cities, and he had this farm out here, and he'd work in the city on the weekend, and he'd take the train to Somerset on the weekend.
That was one of our biggest experiences in grade school. Mrs. Laundrie paid for all the kids to get on the train and go to New Richmond. That
My
was
mother
First time
came
experience.
to Somerset, took the train to North St. Paul, took the streetcar back to Stillwater to visit her sister. Because the road was so bad between here and Stillwater, cars weren't on, so
and
I
I took,
suppose with the horse, they took it to Somerset and,
They had a real good network, now that you bring that up, of streetcars.
oh yeah.
You could take a streetcar from Stillwater all the way to, it'd go through, Matamede, Willarney, and into North
Yeah.
St. Paul. In fact, the factory I worked at scheduled their hours around the time the streetcar came through the factory. We had a little bridge there, and they'd raise the bridge up for the streetcar to go by, but once I got there, the streetcar was eliminated. But yeah, they said the tracks were right through 2 buildings of the factory there.
now my brother and my dad and I, we would take the train to St. Paul and the streetcar to Minneapolis every fall to get our eyes checked. Why we went to Minneapolis, I don't know. And I don't remember how we got home, but apparently we did. I don't remember coming back.
My grandma used to
There were a
go
lot
from
of
Burkhardt to
trains.
Nye to her relatives.
Passenger trains.
The only thing I remember about train is we were driving at Christmas time and we had to stop and a train went by and I never saw anything go so fast. It was a 400.
Oh, yeah.
They used to go from Chicago to the city in 400 minutes. But the tracks must have been pretty good today. They would go, what, 30 miles an hour? But that train just, it was gone. It's the 400.
They used to have a lot of passenger trains because the train, the depot was right behind where we lived. We lived where Howard and Shirley Leverty lived. And we'd have a lot of, well, we used to call them bums in those days. And they used to come to our house and my mother would always feed them, you know. She never let them in the house, but they'd always come knocking and she'd always give them something to eat. It was pretty prevalent in those days.
Did you have a question, Randy?
I was
just wondering if you could tell us some more stories about Bob Seibel, not the one at the schools now, but his father. You two worked,
Well-
he was your boss for a while.
Let me start.
Yeah, I don't know. Bob was just, Harry, go ahead. You worked for him.
He came in 1954. He was out of the Marines. And probably 23, 24 years old, and good-looking guy. The girls all went nuts over him.
Yeah, really.
And, I remember in '54, Mickey Rubboyne and Victor Martinson, they had a football team. The year before, they weren't very good. And then he came his first year. They were undefeated, unscored upon, and untied. And Edwin Kelstow was one of their linemen, and he had recovered a fumble in the end zone at Solon Springs, and they beat him 2-0. That was their close game. And Centuria got beat the first time in the mud down here, 18-0, and so they challenged them. They play again, so they went up and played up there, and they beat them 19-0, beat them worse. So they had some really good teams. And the next year, it was when Russ Kohler was here. That was a really good football team, and he was a business teacher. And if you looked at your keys, I could still see that flash that he hit through the eraser, and the chalk dust hit there all over in front of you because you're looking at your keys. Yeah, and then remember Earl Wayne Deltz was standing up, and his last orders were, "Nobody be out of your seat." When he came back, Earl Wayne was, and he went out on his tippy toes. And he demanded respect, and he got it. But again, he was a great friend of everybody. And then 1957 is when we started playing about. In 57, we lost a game. 58, we tied a game. 59, they lost a game. So they had 21 wins in a row there for a while. Yeah, and then he quit coaching, and things went down the tubes again, and he was getting so much pressure. He came back and coached about the time Steve Holler and Smith, the oldest Smith boy, were there.
Richard.
And they ended up 5-3, and next year they were going to have a great team, but then Smith broke his leg, and everything went to heck, and that's when he got out, and then went to Mr. Wellens, and then from George Dragich was in there, and Harvey Schultz, and then Larry Wellens, and I coached for about 20 years.
Dean Tweeten.
Dean Tweeten, football? Okay, he was our assistant when I was there. We had a pretty good team, and Mr. Jarko was here, and we were goofing around, and so Tom Harvey was a pretty big guy, and myself, and Mickey Liberty, and who's one other guy. And he put us in the line. I always remember that because you have to take the football and run into the next guy, you tackle, and we were getting kind of mad because this is going on a long time. And Harvey hit Butch Kohler and knocked him out, and that was the end of the drill. It was a pretty good group of guys for football at that time.
Yeah,
Harry.
remember Bob and the burlaps sassy on the girls' skirts?
No, the tutu. But Mr. Seibel was the teacher, business teacher, then he went to be principal, and then superintendent. And he was here about 22 years before he passed away. When he passed away, the school district lost a lot of students. I don't know how that happened. But he was on the state board for figuring out school aids.
Oh.
Somehow some kids were here for a short time. I don't know what it is. Anyway, I remember who was the town chairman back then, Milton Mank. He said he saved us a lot of money.
Oh, wow.
Robert.
That one year you were talking about 54, there wasn't 1 point scored against Somerset that year either.
Untied, unscored upon.
Wow.
When we were there, I remember we never played under the lights because we played behind at the school down here. My brother Richard played when Junior Dickoss was here, when Froker was the coach. They played behind St. Anne's. And then they moved down here. And that one year somebody arranged a game with Rockford, Minnesota, and they were undefeated. And they had this big quarterback and a really fast halfback. So we agreed to play in Halloween over in Richmond under the lights. And it ended up 45-19, something like that. We beat them.
That was 8-man, wasn't it?
It was 8-man. A lot of speed in our team. That's what.
Was John the quarterback at that time? Or
No, not yet. Johnny was a freshman when I was a senior.
Okay.
And then the next year he became the quarterback when Jim and Dale were fast halfbacks. Yep.
Harold, when did hockey come here?
Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Was it that
Was it
early?
that long?
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
I think they're celebrating their 25th anniversary this year. The Hockey Association.
Okay.
There was always a big resistance to add a sport. And Richmond did it by having the hockey supporters get on the school board, and then they got it, and then Somerset did the same thing.
Well, did Pete Bakken have something to do with that hockey deal to start?
He had a
or
lot to
something?
do with it. Pete,
Yeah.
and Mike Connors,
Yeah.
Dan Daniels. We put a lot of time and effort into
Yeah.
it. Any other questions?
We're out of here.
Barry and Roland, thank you very much.
Thank you for not bringing any rotten eggs or anything.